Hello everyone and welcome to your November episode of TNL Takes. It's November, it's our second last Patreon exclusive of the year. We should say next month, it's the big one, it's the big TNL ranks where we talk about our top 5 non-Nintendo games of the year for 2019. But our topic today for TNL Takes, MBZ, do you want to let the folks at home know what we're going to delve deep into today?
Well, we're even having a debate about what this encompasses, because I think the term generally has been applied to lots of different things, and you can argue about whether rightly or wrongly. But we're just going to talk about social media, and Caroline was saying to you, like, is YouTube social media? And we're both like, well, no, I don't think YouTube is social media because it's more of like a content platform for people to go and watch things versus social media where the like quote unquote content is on social media, but also it's more of a platform for people to interact with one another. Like on YouTube, yes, comments can talk to one another, but the reason you're there isn't to talk to people in the comments. The reason you're there is to watch the video, similar to Twitch, where the reason you're there is to watch the live stream. Whereas Twitter and Facebook, the reason you're there is to interact with other people. Right, yeah. That's like the stated express. Like social media is because it's social, right? That's the idea behind the term. Yeah,
exactly. And I guess that was the original idea behind the term, perhaps. And it's definitely morphed in a lot of ways in the last, I would argue, about 10 to 15 years since when did Facebook start? In like 2000?
Oh God, who knows? Yeah,
I think it started in like 03, 04, but I didn't get on it until like 09.
I was very late to adopt Facebook. It was maybe when I was leaving school. So right. Like probably 2010 or whatever, I got a Facebook account, and Facebook. Wow, it's an interesting journey.
Well, let's dive in. You go first. Your history with social media.
So, I think that the first social media I got was probably Facebook, and it was like later than most people, because I remember like one of my friends at school having it in like fourth form when we were 15, maybe 14, and I just didn't bother. I was like, I don't want to have people from school on this thing. Like it. I kept a small friend group, and like I was just friends with those people, and this thing with Facebook was happening where everyone would add everybody.
It was like this norm of you could add almost everyone in the school even if you didn't speak to them.
Yeah, even if you didn't know them, really, even if they just existed there. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. Like I'm not, it was just very weird. So I did get on Facebook, and then I was adding people who I'd never really talked to anyway. But I'm like, I don't want these people knowing about my life or what I do or anything. And to be honest with you, I don't think I've maybe posted a status twice in my entire life, but I just never did because it was with all these people. I don't know. I just didn't.
Now the people who seem to post statuses on Facebook are like a much older generation, and it's like certainly. My interpretation is that Facebook is now very uncool and very focused on older people, and I would argue a younger generation use it for very minimal reasons, like maybe in relation to events.
So my sister uses Facebook for Facebook Messenger mainly, because she has all of her friends there, and it's
the best database of all your friends. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So like. No, I don't really know that many people who still actively use it. Sometimes you'll go on Facebook on a stalking session or whatever, and you'll be like, I wonder what this person... And like they haven't updated in like 4 years or whatever. And it's
yeah.
I mean, my profile hasn't been updated in, a decade probably, I think. So it's one of those interesting turns that happened maybe half a decade ago or so, where the parents got on Facebook, and as soon as that happened, everyone left because they were like, totally. My mum's adding me on Facebook. My mum's figured out how to use the internet. She still kind of doesn't know how to, but this is where I'm going to bounce because I don't want this in my life.
Facebook's one of the areas my mum does broadly know how to use. Well, I say
Okay.
that. She is on it and does stuff on it. Does she know how to use it? I'd question that.
Sure.
reality.
And I think actually for that generation, Facebook is quite good. For my mum, for example, found one of her friends that she had lost contact with years and years ago and reconnected with her, and has kept in touch now, and they've met up a few times, like they've come up to Edinburgh and stuff. So I think for that stuff, it's really cool because back when they were younger, they didn't have platforms like this to keep up with people who, just weren't in their life anymore, whatever. It can be a good thing in that way, but also like there's the extent to which with Facebook and everything, everyone is available at all times constantly, and you can always look up what people are doing. Like the internet is the great equalizer in terms of I can look up any person from school on Facebook and get a sense of like what they're doing, where they are in their life, etc. And Facebook and social media generally can be this almost depressing thing because the way that people put things on social media is the highlight reel, right? It's this thing of, this isn't what everyday life is. This is just like the cool things I'm doing, but you're only posting the cool things you're doing. And so it can be like, oh, well, I'm not doing that.
I almost envisage it as it's how celebrities have acted for the last 50 years, but now every random member of the public also feels the need to act like that, where I think I would argue 20, 30 years ago, having a fake social media presence or having a fake public presence wasn't really a thing because random private citizens of the public they care about how they might look to the rest of the public, but there was never a platform in which they could control it and craft it to do so, other than perhaps your own personal appearance and how you speak in public perhaps. But other than that, like Facebook now created a platform where people felt they could portray someone who they might not really be all the time, but was there themselves in what they perceived as their best light, or how they wanted others to perceive them. And it's like this almost paparazzi nature of like how the world is portrayed to others all of a sudden.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's interesting, and I think social media could be one of those things that I think a lot of people talk about in terms of it contributing to a lot of mental health issues and things like that. So it's I feel like it started out well, and then it's just kind of devolved into this thing that I think at this point a lot of people view social media as kind of a toxic thing that can be real bad for a human generally. But yeah, we can get into more of that, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
do you have a history on other channels other than Facebook then?
So I remember you being like, "Hey, I'm on Twitter," and I'm like, "What's that?" And you're like, "I don't know. It seems dumb, but I made an account." And I think you're like one of the first people on Twitter. You did it really early.
I think I got my original account in 2009. Yeah.
Yeah, you were on Twitter.
And my dad was even before me. That's how onto Twitter
exactly.
he was.
So you have a history with being early on Twitter, and I was like, whatever. And then obviously when I started doing my YouTube stuff and I started getting bigger on there, I made like a Facebook fan page for my YouTube stuff. And then it was Nick who said, Go on, use Twitter, make a Twitter account, and then I can like message you and things like that. So basically I made a Twitter so I could talk with Nick through the internet in an easier fashion than being on Skype or whatever. And from there I was like, oh, Twitter's kind of cool because you can choose what you want. Like you can curate this feed of things that you're into, that you want to know about, and follow the people who are within that sphere. So for the longest time it was like very Pokemon focused and Pokemon community people that I followed, and then I branched out to video game stuff, and I'm following all these journalists and websites and things like that, and YouTubers, and there's this point now where my Twitter feed really is, it's a representation of all the things that I'm into, and you can get a sense of who I am from my Twitter feed in a lot of ways, which is an interesting thing.
Have you ever gone back and like unfollowed people, like just to like streamline it a bit, or have you only ever gained?
No, I've unfollowed some people. It doesn't happen that often. It happens when people suck and the internet realizes they suck, and I'm like, well, no, I'm not following fucking Boogie2988 anymore, the fucking fence sitter of the internet. I there's points at which you follow someone on YouTube and then they milkshake duck and you realize, oh, they're bad. Like Colin Moriarty, who I couldn't fucking deal with his incessant terrible tweets anymore, so I unfollowed him. So yeah, there's just some people, it's not that many, but there are people who you realize are not worth following. Or there's people who I don't want to unfollow, but I don't want to see them. Like when I quit Pokemon, there are a lot of people I was following who are my friends. Some of the people who are actually people I knew and I talked to constantly, I didn't do this with. But there were some people who I just muted because they just tweet about Pokemon stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to see that anymore. So I, instead of unfollowing them, I just mute them, which means I stay followed to them. And if they tweet something at me, then I can respond to it. But I don't see them constantly clogging up my timeline, as it were.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it has gone up slowly, probably, but I don't follow new people all that often. It's just when something comes around, I'm like, yeah, I'll follow that. Yeah, cool. I guess.
So we're going to my history, or you got any more?
I mean, I was on
Instagram?
Tumblr for a long time.
Tumblr.
Tumblr it's more like a blogging platform. It's really weird. Tumblr's really
Is Tumblr
weird.
Dead yet, or is it?
I don't know.
I've never experienced much of Tumblr other than like following your page on Tumblr back when you used it,
right?
And it was just like this funny meme generating thing that I just tune into every now and then and found it quite funny.
Yeah, Tumblr is weird. I don't really know what it is anymore or what it was, to be honest, because there's not a lot of original content on there. The majority of what people do is reblog from other people, which is basically a Twitter account that only retweets things. And there are Twitter accounts that do that, but I find that Twitter is this balance between your own thoughts and things you agree with and things that you want to signal boost and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas Tumblr was more about just look at this funny thing that I saw and here it is. So it was kind of weird. I didn't really understand it that much, but I used it for a good while, maybe a year and a half or so. And yeah, and Instagram's one of those things where there are people who are serial Instagrammers who will post pictures every day and all this stuff. And me and my sister are similar in the idea that we treat Instagram as she does it much more frequently than I do, but I treat it as a very rare occurrence that I'll post on Instagram. Mainly because I just don't like pictures of myself a lot of the time, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't look good in this at all. I don't want to put myself out in the world. So yeah, that's one of those things. But the thing with Instagram that is a big deal in my household is that she will constantly message me for puns for her Instagram posts, and she will refuse to put up an Instagram post until we have brainstormed
you're the
perfect
engineer
pun.
Behind her Instagram
I am the PR person behind her Instagram, basically. Yes, okay, here's the thing, what I do with Instagram, I have this photo and I'm like, okay, cool, and I'll think of a caption in like less than 5 seconds and just post it. She will agonize over coloring and lighting and adjustments and all this, and she'll do an edit on the photo itself, and then she'll spend 6 hours just going back and forth on what a caption should be, what should the hashtag be, should I capitalize this? I don't know. It's just one of those things she likes to do. She wants to craft the perfect Instagram post every time, and then she puts it out there. And she has some really good. She does a lot of traveling, so she has lots of really cool shots of places she's been and things like that. But yeah, it's a weird obsession she has, and I'm like, why do you do this? Like, you don't need to just fucking think of a thing and say it. No one cares. But I think it was because there was one photo she took of, there was a giant Chewbacca, like a cuddly Chewbacca. It was around episode 7 time when a lot of Star Wars merch was coming around, and I came up with the pun, I'm riding solo, because it was from the fucking terrible dance mini game from Star Wars Connect, because they do Jason Derulo's Solo or whatever it's called, that song, and it's Han Solo, I'm Han Solo, and so I was like, do that as a pun. And then there's a line from Maz Kanata in Force Awakens about Chewie being my boyfriend or something like that, and so she did a hashtag associated with that. So I came up with all of that for her, and then all of her friends were like, oh, that's so good, and now she's like, oh no, and now I need to keep up the appearance that I'm the mastermind behind these puns. So that's what happened, basically.
That's good.
And then there was Vine for like whatever that was. I don't know, I used Vine for a bit. I made a stupid Vine with an elephant, and that was about it. I don't know, Vine's weird. They're just gone now, I guess. So
yeah, weird.
Yeah, I don't think there are any other platforms. Crux of the matter is Twitter is the one that I use the most often. If you were to say I was addicted to something, it would be Twitter. I check Twitter when I wake up. I check it before I go to bed. I have TweetDeck open all day. It's just ever present in my life, and I think it's bad. I think Twitter stops me from being productive. It really is a bad thing that I should stop using. Yes, so I feel like we can talk about that more, but you go ahead and talk about your social media intake.
History. Yeah, Facebook I started when I was about 18 in 2009, so definitely much later than most of my friends. And as we said, that's about the same time I started Twitter. And that Twitter account was really like me becoming engaged in politics. So it is still my real name account, and then I would follow loads of like political journalists in the UK and US a bit, and at that time I had like a blog about politics and stuff, and I'd like write blogs, and I'd promote it through that, and I'd try and read other people's blogs, and I'd be like, I'm a Twitter user and I have a blog, and I'm going to follow all these other people who are similar age and whatever to me, and we're going to like each other's blogs and talk about it online, and we're going to watch political shows and tweet about that. And I was like, right, I felt really motivated to do it, and I did it for like a few months and just realized how damn difficult it was to like build a following, although it was still a really cool, satisfying thing to do when someone random would like read your blog and be like, that's really cool, or have you thought about this? And you'd all of a sudden be debating with someone you'd never met before, and it was like, this is weird and cool. So that was what my politics Twitter, I now call it, or like my real name Twitter, and I still use it for political purposes. Like I don't really tweet as much anymore, and I don't run a blog. I just follow political people, follow the news, retweet what I agree with often, and so on. And then when I was really like getting a lot more into video game stuff again, and then we obviously started the podcast, long before that, I sort of thought, well, I know people have had real issues when they have a Twitter account that focuses on two things specifically. So I didn't want a politics Twitter account to be merged with like my video game account, or at the time a lot of board game stuff as well. So I decided to create like a separate board game, video game Twitter account, and that's now the Ballyman91 account I currently use. And I've kept these two accounts going, where one's politics. I always see like one as my work and one as my like hobby, my social life, my private life. It's not private, it's public. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It's like Twitter is it's
in
weird
work
in
and
that
out
way.
of work, exactly. So then I follow all the video game journalists and stuff on that, and follow back like a lot of listeners and things, and that's fun. And I'll tweet a lot more on that one about video games, what I'm playing, and etc. And yeah, I really like having two accounts, and I must pick up over 90% of my news from like Twitter, and then the small amount that's not is probably from podcasts, to be honest. Not that they're great at breaking news normally, but
no, I mean, it depends what type of podcast you're
it
listening
depends,
to. Like
absolutely.
the daily news podcasts that exist. There's a few of those that
definitely
are good at that stuff.
So and I've had both those Twitter accounts since, well, I think my more nerdy one was set up in like 2012, 2011 maybe.
Yeah, I think mine was 2011 probably.
Yeah. And I am very, very addicted to Twitter. And I don't see it as maybe as unhealthy as there's definitely a phase when I was really into Facebook, like at university, and meeting new people, adding them on Facebook, and seeing what was going on in these people's social life, and hanging out with this group, and doing this and whatever. And there was definitely a phase where I felt very much Facebook was getting unhealthy, and I'd limit like the amount, like I deleted Facebook from my phone, and I would only go on it on my laptop like occasionally, like I'd maybe at the start of the day or like once a day, and then all of a sudden I'd check in every few days. And at the as it stands, I have to use Facebook a bit at my work actually, but I don't because I'm in control of like a page in relation to my job, but I don't go on Facebook really otherwise. I might check in like once a week, because I just found myself scrolling through it, just seeing what other people were up to, and it was just like, I could feel that being really unhealthy. Whereas as much as I can see scrolling through TweetDeck and looking at articles as being unhealthy, it's a lot more it does feel a lot more me and time and relevant, because I am just like looking up video game articles and what people are saying about video games generally, and I really enjoy that, and it helps the podcast and all sorts of other reasons. So I definitely don't see that as unhealthy. So yeah, I think I've never really ventured outside of Facebook and Twitter, to be honest. I've had such an old phone for such a long time that I've not even bothered to like get an Instagram account, because I've got hardly any data, like memory to...
Yeah, it's weird when I'm scrolling through Instagram sometimes I see an image of you and I'm like, wait, I was like, oh, it's Caroline, because she posts on Instagram not super frequently, but like, more than I do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'd like to have an Instagram account when I upgrade my phone eventually and travel the world and take
probably
pictures.
do a podcast Instagram account, but then like I don't know what we would put on it.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's weird.
Yeah, something, because I'd like Instagram, I'd find like a cool place where I could happily follow all the people I know in real life, but still do a combination of travel and video games in one kind of place, rather than keeping them divided in that way, where I wouldn't follow loads of people. I don't really follow a ton of people I know on Twitter in any case, but all the ones I do, I probably know them through political Twitter and follow them that way. So yeah. But anyway, that's my history with social media, to be honest. I've not ventured. I had like Snapchat for a very brief time.
Oh yeah,
that was fun, but
but Snapchat, the thing with that is I don't consider that social media either, because
no, it's not really.
That's like, if you have friends on there, well, I guess it is then in that sense, if we're counting Facebook, because Facebook is friends, but it's also open. It's so weird. Like IGN has a Snapchat account and they always promote that, and I'm always like, what? Why? Like, I guess they do a lot of advertising through Snapchat, and like their Snapchat does really well in that sense. I don't know. Snapchat's a weird thing that I've never really understood. I'm just too old, I think, to understand it, maybe. Even in this era, like, we're like, oh no, we're old people, we don't understand what the kids are using anymore. And like TikTok's blowing up, and I'm like,
I know.
You only found about TikTok like the other day.
A month ago.
Yeah, exactly. I've known about TikTok for a while, but I don't know. I try to keep on top of that stuff. A lot of this stuff I also hear from Jeff Gersman, because Jeff just makes an account on any social media that ever exists, and I find that quite funny, because he just always like, he's keeping up with all the weird random places that exist. Cool.
Shall we? So we kind of know our history of social media. We more or less have explained how we currently use it. Like we do a lot in and around the podcast, and just like what we're playing video game wise. We've started, but been doing a long time where we beat a game and we'll do a tweet like, "Oh, I beat this game," and this is what I think,
I don't remember when I started that or why I started it. I feel
because I'm pretty sure I just copied you, but I can't remember.
You did, yeah, and I don't know if I invented this. It's not really a thing you invent, but it's I don't know if I did invent it or not.
I think some video game journalists must have done it, cause
but the thing is, I don't see anyone on my timeline ever do it. That's the thing. Like, I'm the only one who does this thing where I finish a game, I take a screenshot of it, of the credits rolling, and I'm like, GG whatever game I just finished.
I mean, we were doing it before the PS4 and the Switch even had a feature to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, we just used our phones and took pictures of the screen and were like, hey, I beat this Super Nintendo game whatever on my Wii. So I don't know why that was a thing, but I do it now, which is every time I finish a video game. I think it might have been around the time when I was starting to get into the video game, how many in a year you can beat challenge. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to document all of these, whatever. So that's what I did. And so every time I finish a game, I'm like, here's the credits. I roll credits. And now I have, if you go and search GG on my Twitter account, you can just scroll through all the games I've beaten and the screenshot I've taken every time I finished a game, which is pretty cool.
And I think that before we kind of started our Discord server, like, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, Twitter was the only real way that we would interact with like listeners of This Nintendo Life and stuff. And it was a way of like, you'd occasionally get people tweet at us like, oh, I thought this about the show. And that was really cool. And obviously there was the email account, but that's not public. That's them sending it to a private thing. But like having it public, I think it's quite cool. And then that's kind of dropped off considerably, both because I think I certainly tweet about video games a lot less, but also that kind of energy I put a lot more onto Discord, where I'd rather interact with people who are already there engaging about it rather than just me spouting my thing from my Twitter account, you know? Like, I feel like
I still love spouting my thing from my Twitter account constantly.
I mean, I do too. I just don't do it as much as I used to, but I probably would like to do more.
Yeah. Do you think that's you deliberately cutting back on using Twitter, or is it more that you have a tendency to just scroll through and see what other people are doing and less have the desire to tweet something yourself?
It's hard because, I mean, if it's just the regular working week or whatever, and then I get in, I might play a bit of a game, might go for a run, and then by the time I'm like just looking at Twitter from like a leisure perspective, I almost don't feel the need. I don't want to tweet, I just want to read, kind of thing. Like, I just want to take it in, and I have to be in a very specific mood. And I always find this, I have that mood when I wake up in the morning. Like, I want to tweet something, but I realize most of our listeners are obviously American, so if I tweet something, it never gets reacted to for like 5, 6, 7 hours.
So you're just like trying to maximize your optimum time to send.
Well, yeah, it's totally a thing. But,
no, it's true. It is 100% a thing. I've just never thought of it that way. I don't know. For me, there is such a low barrier entry to a tweet that you can just do it, and it doesn't, like, I don't place value on my tweets. There will be tweets where I just say something just stupid. Like, I'll just tweet hi, randomly. And I've got like 40,000 tweets or something stupid. Most of them are garbage, but that's the point of the platform for me, is not to craft something and make it like this perfect thing, is to just say whatever you think at the current time.
I like doing a combination. I do like when there is a good crossover between politics and video games, and I can quote tweet an article, and having read the article, I'll be like, this is my take. And then some people might come back, some people might just like it. And then other times I might just retweet something. And I will enjoy tweeting something dumb occasionally because it's just silly. But I agree. A combination is fun. And it's cool that it's just like a platform where you can do that. And I don't know, shall we maybe go into some of the advantages of social media?
Sure. I mean, the thing with Twitter specifically for me is, like, when I started doing it, I had a big following generally, and I think Twitter is a place for people with big followings in some senses. If your following is too big, then it can be a nightmare hellscape, and I think thankfully I've stayed in this place where my following was big enough, and like now it's smaller, but like it's at this level where the people who respond to me and stuff like that are generally people who know who I am and have followed me and are nice people and aren't assholes, right? And so I think I get a lot of feedback from Twitter, because when I tweet something, there will usually be someone to respond to it, or someone who I can have a conversation with about it. And I think a lot of people who don't have a following from somewhere through some means on the internet, they use Twitter more as a way to interact with those types of people who do have a following, right? So you have the two people. It almost is a class system with Twitter, where it's like you have the people with clout and the people who are like followers, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I don't know who has a better time with Twitter, if it's the person who talks to their person they really like and then gets a response and is really, thrilled by it, or if it's the person who has the clout and gets lots of responses from people and is happy that they're talking to lots of people. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, the more you hear about people talking about the ones with the big followings, it just sounds like it's getting worse and worse in terms of they'll put something out onto Twitter, good or bad, just an opinion, whatever, and then some troll will just weigh in, say something nasty, and it's kind of out of the blue. And like so as you say, like, size of my Twitter following, that almost never had, I don't think it really has ever happened, to be honest. Like, someone's never come out the blue and overtly said something nasty to me, to be honest, on Twitter. I don't think that's ever happened. Whereas I just think if I had a following of 20,000, 30,000, from having maybe some tremendously big podcast or YouTube channel, and I was tweeting like, hey, Luigi's Mansion 3 is a really great game, like 100% there would just be like a minority of people who just come at me like, how can you think it's like that? It's awful. Look at this. Or just like, you're a complete idiot. And then
you feel the need to respond to those people. And then you just get down this hole, and it's like really bad, and it sucks.
Definitely.
It's
and that's something I've never experienced, but you just know that most of the podcasters we listen to involved in video games who have platforms of at least 20, 30,000 followers, most of them have definitely experienced that probably more often than not when they do tweet stuff. And as a result, what happens? A lot of them tweet less, or they tweet with a knowledge that they're going to ignore all the responses, including the good ones. Unfortunately, because it's very hard to filter. Sure, you can block, you can mute, but if there's someone new that's come out of the ether to say something nasty, you can't preempt that necessarily. So I think in effect, a lot of people, if they do tweet a lot, from what I've listened to them talk about these things, they say, "Oh yeah, I tweet, but I just don't look at the comments or something," and that's
right,
and that's maybe ultimately missing the point of what Twitter was originally meant to be doing. But at the same time, I don't think anyone could have predicted the sheer rise of like trolls generally on Twitter and the internet in general, I think you could argue. But
yeah, and just social media as a propaganda tool in many ways. Like, it is kind of a nightmarish hellscape.
But before we get to the disadvantages of social media, we've got to stick to the list, and that's the good side of social media.
And I think for me that is one of my favorite things about social media, is the interaction with people, is the ability to talk to people who know things that you do, who are on a similar level to you in terms of the things you're interested in and things you care about, right? Because there's not a lot of people who have the same level of investment or knowledge in things like Star Wars or Pokemon or video games or whatever that we're into in our real lives. And so it's cool to throw something out there, like a deep cut opinion on a thing that some regular person would have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, and then get people to like that tweet or retweet that opinion or weigh in on it themselves. I appreciate that a lot. And
it was something you had for quite a long time, just with your YouTube channel, and then as I gained some followers through the podcast, it was something quite new to me, where I tweet some things and some people who listen to the podcast would tweet back at me and say, "Oh, I enjoyed this," or something. And it's like this really nice interaction where we're just having a discussion online about video games, which I just think is a real big advantage of social media. Like, if you think of a world before social media, how would I ever have a discussion with video games with someone in the United States without being a massive stalker and looking up their phone number and giving them like a phone call? You know, like, how else am I meant to do that? It's a very normal thing to do, to follow someone you're interested in on Twitter, and if you like something or disagree with them about something, to tweet at them and say that. Like, that's a very normal thing to do now, that I think 20, 30 years ago, there's no alternative way of doing that other than face-to-face or a random phone call.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. The internet is the great flattener, right? It's the great equalizer that we have, and we were discussing this before we started recording, but the idea that an event like The Mandalorian on Disney Plus is happening and people in the UK have no legal way to watch that show and have to wait 3 months to legally watch it is frankly absurd, because on social media, the conversation is centered around the big thing that is happening. And something like Star Wars, a Star Wars TV show on this big streaming platform that's just going to be a huge thing because it's Disney, one of the biggest companies in the world. Of course everyone's talking about that, and you don't want to be left out. Obviously, that's the thing. I think maybe to some degree, social media, one of the negatives we can get into is like the FOMO that comes with social media, like that fear of missing out, the idea of like Death Stranding came out and both of us were like, we should play Death Stranding because it's kind of being in the conversation, but also we're like, well, no, we don't really have time for that, and we don't really want to play it. If I had time,
I 100% would play it.
Exactly,
and maybe for lots of the wrong reasons, where it is that FOMO, it is that everyone's talking about it.
Like Red Dead Redemption 2 last year, I bought that game because of FOMO, because I wanted to be part of the conversation around it. And I ended up really disliking that game. And to some degree, that's a good thing, because I have a platform on which this podcast, where I can be like, hey, this is my thought on Red Dead Redemption 2. I think it's garbage. Don't buy it, right? Like, I kind of have a responsibility in a sense, but also I could have just not, I could have just not got it.
But I felt the same pressures to buy that game and actually ended up enjoying it like considerably more than you. And that was... I mean, that's maybe related to the fact I bought a PS4 as well as the fact that we have the podcast. It was that double whammy of like, I own a PS4 now. We have the podcast. I could buy Red Dead 2 and talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This is a cool thing I could do. And so social media is just a cool way in that sense of enhancing and giving you us that platform to go further than just the podcast. And it's important to say, like, our Twitter following like of the podcast is a big tenet of a lot of what we do. I'm sure there's a lot of people who follow the podcast who don't follow us on Twitter, or are members on the Discord server, but
yeah,
I'm sure there's still an equal number, if not more, who are involved in all those channels,
Yeah, totally. I think another advantage is just the way that you can curate your feed around events happening and things happening. I think this is definitely a rough thing with Facebook, because the people you add on Facebook, they're just people who you kind of know but don't really know, right? And so there are people on Facebook who will say some things about politics that you're like, don't think I agree with you in any fucking way. It seems bad what you're saying. Whereas with Twitter, it's different because you're curating your own feed. And so the types of people that we follow are generally not right-wing assholes, Like, we have a very curated, selected feed of the types of people we're following, and therefore the things we'll be exposed to are going to just enhance our own views, essentially. And so when things like, political events happen or video game events happen, it's cool to have that curated selection of things that you are really into just happening all at once. And I think my favorite instance of it is, things like E3 or Nintendo Directs, where you'll have the stream up on one screen and you have Twitter on your phone or Twitter on another screen, whatever, and you can kind of have that real-time live reaction to seeing people just freak out at something happening. Which
it's great.
I
it's
love.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that again, how would you have done that before social media? The equivalent is like going to a sports game, either at like a bar or a pub, or to the sports game itself, and enjoying like some visual spectacle together and sharing
and
that
that
moment.
kind of happens in Nintendo New York. They do like viewing parties for
become a sport.
Directs.
Yeah,
exactly.
and
so fans go along to the store in New York and just watch on a big screen, and everyone freaks out together, which is it's basically the real life version of what I see on Twitter, essentially. Just kind of cool.
No, that's another really good advantage. Any other advantages we can think of?
I don't know. I think news is a big thing, and like the speed at which you access information. Twitter is like, someone can be in a huge, terrible thing that happens, like a fire starts going off, and someone can take a video on their phone in 5 seconds and throw it up on Twitter in 5 more seconds. And the way that traditional news media works, they can't work that fast. And so the way that you get access to information, all that stuff happens so instantaneously. I remember, very stupid thing to get information about, but when what's his name was born, the first royal child that William and Kate had,
George,
yeah, I guess his name is George. What's his going to be? George the 7th or something stupid? Jesus.
7th,
Even if, I don't know, he'd probably be like fucking 50 years old by the time he ascends the throne, even if the throne exists by that point.
It's a royal baby, yeah.
It's a royal baby. We were in the garden at like my auntie's house, whatever, and I was just like scrolling through Twitter, and as soon as that happened, as soon as the baby was born, I was like, oh, baby's been born. Like, I just knew it instantly before Sky News had it, before any places on the TV had it, and I could tell people, like, this has just happened, I know it instantly. And my auntie was like, oh wow, how do you know that? I was like, it's Twitter. Like, it just things happen and
this
you know about them.
Blue bird told me.
Yeah, it did. It just whispered in my ear very, very keenly. I think that is one of the great benefits to Twitter, is that free flow of information. But it can also be weaponized, right? And it can be used for propaganda, and information can be false. And, we've had our fair share of talks generally about news and the validity of it, and the way in which people
we can roll into the disadvantages then, because I think we have said the advantages, and I think we could start with the political aspect of the disadvantages. And
totally,
it's interesting what you're saying about curation, and the thing is, say when you had your MBZ Facebook page, as in like all your fans listening, say you were purporting a political stance using that page, if you say you're saying something very left wing, and then all of a sudden some of the more right wing members of your group started commenting saying that's wrong, and this is how it is. As the page like owner or creator, you could just boot those people off your Facebook page.
Right.
So as a result, the page becomes more and more left wing, with everyone who follows it having not been booted out for being right wing, and the cycle continues. Now, flip this on its head, where you can have far right Facebook pages and people join because they've been brought in by who God knows what, like some story that they've been interested in.
Yeah.
Then the curator, every time someone in the center or the left calls out that's racist, or this is wrong, or this is, you've not got your facts right on this one, the curator of that page can just boot them out, and so you get this increasing spread of the far right. It's a radicalization within that one group. It's
entrenchment, really.
Entrenchment, exactly. Yeah. So that's the really scary thing, is that you can become almost like a mini dictator over your own. And it's more than just a website, but your own platform, essentially,
yes,
a Facebook page.
Exactly.
And it's very easy to say to Facebook, "Oh, you've been too slow in stopping these pages," and etc. But like, when you compare that to journalism, and the reason that like newspapers in the UK get in trouble for purporting the wrong thing is because legally they have to report what is truth, and yes, they can spin things, and they, believe me, they do spin those things, but ultimately they do have to have some semblance of truth to those to what they're saying. And if they don't, they can get called up and fined and have to apologize. But on top of that, they have their newspaper's reputation, or even their broadcaster's reputation if they're a broadcaster in the UK. And if you don't have, Facebook has completely like lost its kind of face in terms of what it's been putting out, because it's not an entity that puts it out. However, the BBC, for example, have to put out things that are truthful. Otherwise, the reputation of the entire BBC gets soured, and viewers would drop. But also legally, they have to put forward facts. So, like, it is this debate at the moment now of individual creators putting stuff on Facebook. Does Facebook have a responsibility to ensure that what is being reported is factual? Right. And that's the interesting thing in the last month or so, is where Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress has essentially said no.
Yeah.
And you're left with this situation where should there be some sort of control over the media when it comes to facts being represented or not? And I think it's a really difficult debate. There's fact checking is a really big deal, I know, in the US in comparison to the UK, because our broadcasting laws are different. In the UK, you've got to get your facts right. You can't be like, UK broadcast media is supposed to not be partisan. Now it's partisan on lots of issues. I think the royal family is a perfect example of one issue that they're incredibly pro royal family. There's no Republican sentiment at all in our broadcast media. Yeah. But when it comes to like left-right politics, by and large, on a lot of issues, they are more or less in the Now, one issue I have is that by being apolitical, they end up being very pro-centrist, which I think has its own issues. Right. Yes. However, to compare that to the US, obviously, where it's just left and right, and it's just a bit Wild West in terms of regulations, in terms of what the broadcast media can say and can't say. Yeah. And then you have to think, should Mark Zuckerberg have some sort of software, or should there be a verification process in publishing things, and how much power is that giving to Facebook? Or should that power be given to some other regulator? And if it's being given to the state, is that just the state regulating the media? And that's not appropriate either. It's this breakdown in reputation of broadcasters and newspapers in favor of online websites that can say what they want when they want to reach a wider audience very fast. And it's just completely usurped the idea of reputation and truth, where more or less the media have been bumbling along, getting it more or less right for a very long time, and it's because of their reputations with a combination of the law that's been the case. And then Facebook has just completely upended that entire rationality.
Yeah, and it's because of virality. It's because things can just snowball and misinformation can just get anywhere so quickly. And because of this inherent, the world we live in currently, which is so black and white in terms of either you're left or you're right, there is no room for any kind of discussion, and not that there should be necessarily, right? Because there are positions on the right, especially, that are just not worth engaging with. They shouldn't be engaged with, and they have no basis in any reason for someone to even stoop to that level.
Definitely the norm, I would have said, about 10, 15 years ago, before Facebook was as big as it is now, was like, if someone's got a viewpoint that's different to yours, you should debate them, you should challenge them, you should do this.
Right,
and I think no platforming, quite rightly in my view, has become much more prevalent, and it's not just a case of you should be up for debating anyone anymore. Just the fact that you give anyone a platform, and people will argue that this is against free speech and this and that and the other. The second you take a platform away, it's nothing to do with free speech. Free speech is the right to publicly say what you want to say. That doesn't mean you have to be given a platform to say it.
Right, exactly. Twitter isn't a public platform. It's a platform controlled by a company, and a company can do what it wants with their platform.
Companies, universities, schools, colleges, these are all platforms that those bodies have the choice of who they put on and who they don't. Right. So I completely, I'm a big believer in no platforming, especially when it comes to the far right. And that's where, again, Facebook, if you can spread something fast and wide enough in a short space of time, it completely trumps the truth every time around. Yes. So this idea that debating or having that conversation is beneficial in some way to progressives or the left in general is, in my view, that argument has been completely blown out of the water. Like this, there used to be this phrase like, they must have the light shone on them, and now we just know that shining the light on them strengthens them. Like it's exactly it's like a plant, shining the sunlight. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help us. It helps them.
Just fucking growing, and just polluting.
And Facebook and the way that the right has spread fast and wide is pretty shocking. And we should definitely mention the YouTuber whose name.
Yes, I was just about to bring it up. So, the YouTube channel is called Innuendo Studios. His name is Ian Danskin. He does fantastic breakdowns of the way in which the current right uses social media and how they build followers to their cause and the tactics that they use. It's fantastic stuff. He's excellent at just breaking it down. So yeah, that's very worth checking out if you're interested in this whole idea when it comes to social media, because it really is it's a lot of what's going to swing elections. Social media has such a huge role to play in the political landscape. It's kind of scary the degree to which it has an influence.
Exactly, and it has little to no regulation over elections in comparison to newspapers and broadcast media. And we're in a general election right now in the UK, and it's just, that there's interference going on, it, and then our courts are just under huge amounts of pressure right now to try and make sense of, okay, but does this count as foreign interference? Is this lawful? Is this unlawful? And obviously the UK's got an uncodified constitution that brings up all sorts of problems in relation to the internet, because an uncodified constitution is all based on principle of what happened previously. So if the internet wasn't around 30 years ago, if you're comparing legal cases to what happened previously, they don't make any sense. You need new rules, new norms, new societal
this has been priorities. The case since when copyright strikes were happening on YouTube, almost a decade ago at this point. And there is no regulation for it. The striking, the companies being able to just do whatever they want, even if they're fake companies. There was a whole thing, back really at the genesis of when this was becoming a problem, where Chugga Conroy and Nintendo Capri Sun, their channels got shut down because of bogus copyright claims by some asshole. And that's crazy, because they were two of the biggest channels for video games at the time, and their channels just got shut down because some asshole decided they wanted to do a false flagging situation. And there was no recourse for that. And there still really isn't any recourse for it, you know? I get copyright claims on my videos from people who I know do not own the copyright in any way. And it means that, you know, it would be worse when I was actually getting a lot of traction and a lot of traffic. But that type of period when you first put a video up, that's when you get the most views, it's when you get the most revenue. And so as soon as that happens, if a strike happens instantly, you lose access to the vast majority of that revenue, because once all those views have happened, there's far fewer that come in after the fact. So yeah, and it kind of applies to all these platforms generally. And Twitter has just been very slow to react. Facebook as well, slow to react in terms of tools that they give their users to mitigate some of these problems. Like, they cut off so many features to just verified users. If you have a blue tick, you can do stuff like curating your feed to only see responses from other verified people, or you can have like muted certain phrases and things like that. It's ridiculous that they don't allow people to have that kind of stuff, because so many people are harassed on social media and get death threats and bullshit thrown their way, and it's a living nightmare in this current day and age with that stuff. It's like it's trying to exist on the internet can be impossible for some people.
Shall we look at how it's changed since we were younger? I mean, we have hinted on this as well.
Yeah.
But I think, especially Facebook-wise, we said it before, but like all the older people came in and all the young people
basically
flew away. And then Twitter, I think it's hard to say. I think Twitter exists on so many different bubbles and spheres,
right,
that age-wise, I think it's a real variety. And
I will say that I don't think many young people use Twitter. You know, people of my cousin's generation, like she's 16, and like anyone her age or younger, they're on Snapchat with their friends. They're on Instagram. Instagram is the younger person's social media for the most part.
And that does make me interested in, how do they get their news? Like, do they get their news? Or because I get a lot of news through Twitter, definitely. So, you know, do you think they get it, or are they of an age where news is not important, and most people get into news when they're older anyway?
I think when you're 16, you don't really care about the news. I didn't when I was that age, so I think that it is only when you get to kind of going to university age that you start to get more. Although she is very engaged with it, I think it's probably because she just watches news at home with her parents or whatever. But or just reads the newspaper. Some people still do that, but Instagram has become, and Instagram is basically Twitter, but the focus is less on what you're saying and more what the image is, right? And so it's an image-based economy. It's to some degree even more toxic, because there are all these people who are really good-looking people on Instagram, and you're like, oh, I feel really bad because I'm not like them, whatever. So yeah, there's a degree to which that is very bad for young people, and just image-wise is a terrible thing. So, you know, it's pretty rough out there.
If we could burn it all to the ground, or even just change some aspects, how could social media be made better?
I think just giving people the tools to deal with a lot of nonsense that happens. I mean, it's kind of proved to be the case that anonymity isn't actually a factor.
I was literally about to talk about anonymity and a controversial idea, which was whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, or anything, everything needs to be, to make an account, it must be ID verified. But
my point I was going to make is that doesn't matter, because Facebook does, like majority of people who say sour shit on Facebook have their real name, their location, their friends, all open for anyone to look at.
You're right.
They are
the
not
first
afraid.
Step is to crack down on those people. I just mean in the ones who are nameless and human.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is people can just make a million accounts and just come back and come back and come back. And like, it used to be the Twitter egg was the thing, like you're an egg account because you got no profile picture, whatever.
Right, but if you had to have ID verification, you can only make one account. Or maybe you could make a maximum of 2 or 3.
Exactly, and then if that account gets banned, then you're banned and you're
right.
gone.
It has repercussions, so what you say becomes more. But as you say, the process by which people are punished or reported must be very clear and crisp and fair, and
totally.
that we're not even at that stage yet. As you say, with the people who have their full names on Facebook saying some horrendous stuff.
And I think the other thing is just there is no accountability for people who have a platform. And that is mainly in the YouTube and Twitch sphere, as opposed to, I mean, Twitter, Twitter's not going to ban Donald Trump from their platform, are they? But they could do.
But he's if he was going by their own rules, he has broken a number of them.
If Donald Trump was just a regular person and not the president, he would have been banned and taken off Twitter however long ago. But they can't because he's the president, and people are above the law in many senses.
When there's been other far right people, they've just unverified them and not actually taken them off, to my knowledge.
Sure. But you also have to look at this from a corporate perspective in terms of Donald Trump is creating controversy and therefore engagement, and therefore people are staying on the platform longer, and therefore the platform is more successful. As a result of that, they are losing out on growing their business if they are to ban the biggest people on the platform. It's the case with Twitch, with Dr. Disrespect. Like, that motherfucker should have been banned from Twitch for the shit he pulled at E3. He should have been gone. What did they do? They gave him a slap on the wrist and he was back 2 weeks later and had even more people watching him because it was treated as a comeback. That is disgusting to me. The fact that because he is a big person, a platform, they're going to allow him to just walk free, essentially. It's ridiculous. And the problem is that in a capitalist society, you have to rely on that source of income to grow your business, to be larger, etc., etc. And if you have a big person on your platform, you need to keep them around no matter what gross shit they do. Which fucking sucks.
Yep. So how do we change that?
We just ban social media. No one ever uses it. I don't know. It's like there are so many good things about social media, I wouldn't, and just the internet generally, I wouldn't have been able to talk to all these people through my Pokemon stuff and make friends with all these people across the world if it wasn't for interactions that you have on social media.
And host a podcast and talk about it, and it's tricky because governments who you would ultimately think are the most responsible for like stepping in and doing something about these things are almost some of the furthest behind institutions when it comes to like knowledge of these things. And like there were so many like videos going around when Zuckerberg was being questioned by Congress by some of the older members, more often to the right of politics, asking Zuckerberg some stuff about like the internet, and some of the things they say, you're like, why are you legislating on this stuff? Like, it's actually insane. Or for example, like the UK Labour Party have just announced a policy of making free, like internet free by 2030, and some like right-wing politicians have interpreted this as like Labour just wants you to have free Netflix, and it's like that's different.
Fucking fuck
that's
off.
Different to the internet. And then someone sarcastically said, "Yeah, I'm sure everyone would have been up in arms if Labour had been proposing free libraries back in 100 years ago." It's like it's just a different form of information, and while it should be free, it should also be regulated in in the same way other forms of information are. And at the moment, it's not meeting it. You're paying a lot for it. You're paying a lot just to get some real racism down your internet, and that needs to be addressed.
We live in a post-truth world, man. Like, the anti-intellectualism that just abounds is just staggering to me. It fucking baffles me that there are people who believe in some of the shit that comes out of Trump's mouth. It just, like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how you can be that stupid of a human being. It's just, I don't know. It's crazy. And I think that the thing that's even scarier is that we now live in a era where obviously words can be twisted, but we are approaching an era where video footage can be twisted. Doctoring of images, doctoring, like the ability to do these deep fakes where you are able to transplant someone's face onto someone else and like use their words, and like some of the stuff that people are talking about Hollywood about, you know, when actors die using digital recreations of them. But that's some of those tools have democratized to the point where anybody can kind of do that. And it is terrifying to be in a world where you don't know if a video is real or not. You just have no idea because the technology is at that point.
There is still that huge assumption that, I saw video footage, it must be real. Like
exactly,
images and video footage. Images less so, I'd argue, perhaps. But like the second people are seeing video footage, it's just perceived as reality. And that's really scary when you suddenly get the liberal left saying that video is fake, because then what happens is real videos come out and the right say that video is fake. And
yeah, exactly.
And this is already the term fake news has already been brought back around onto the liberal left, and it's still a hole that politics can't get out of right now. Is how do you define reality versus non? And that's one question I really don't have the answer to.
Nope. I don't think anyone does really at this point in time, but I don't know. You need smart people, and there are smart people out there. Like, you know, there are people who say smart things all the time, and there's good people on Twitter. Some very good, like, you know, you can learn a lot from Twitter. There's lots of people who know a lot more about certain issues, and they'll be like, I'll often wander across, like, here's a thread of like 90 tweets or whatever where someone lays out this issue and the problems with it and things like that. Yeah. And that stuff is really helpful when it's a certain thing that maybe you're not as informed about. So Twitter can have these really, really good moments, and there are good things about it. And I am also addicted to it, which is a fucking problem. That's the thing. I've had TweetDeck up this entire time we've been recording this podcast. I just can't escape from it almost. It's bad, and I think it's hard because it is a thing that feels like you just get connected to lots of things happening all the time. And when maybe you're not doing that much, then it just feels like there is at least things happening and you want to be involved in things like that. So I don't know. It's a weird world we live in now.
I definitely feel like as big of an imprint as I guess we have on the internet between your YouTube channel, our podcast, there are still a lot of people with a far bigger imprint, far bigger followings, far bigger networks of people who follow those people. And I think I'm not in that position, but if I was in a position where I did have, let's say, over 50k Twitter followers or Facebook likes on a page of mine, there is a lot going on. It is all moving so fast that having that following, just from your own safety perspective, I think would feel very strange. Like, I think that if you are in the sort of streamer, YouTuber, celebrity category of having millions of followers, and there has been like this huge rise in the far right in the last few years, like that is horrendously scary in terms of these people relying on the state to protect them ultimately from some really bad stuff that's going on. So I think that as much as it would be nice to have a few more followers on Twitter, I think that it is kind of scary having that tied to, and as you said before, like a lot of people having their businesses tied to just a few people flagging copyright on a video can really affect their income massively month on month. And that's not necessarily a position, well, it's a position that more and more people are finding themselves in. It's not one that is appealing to me personally more and more to be a part of until these websites, until the boards of these companies understand what's going on and the effect that I think that there's so many detrimental effects of what's going on right now that we're not going to find out for a good 20 to 30 years. No. Financially, mental health wise, politically, the state of our democracies. Like, I think these are much wider questions that it's hard to identify the real issues with these things because we are in the eye of the storm right now. And like, there's an election right now in the UK. There's an election in the US next year. I think there's a lot to come out on the other side where we're going to look back and be like, climate change is important and we got to get that sorted, but we also need to like address all the stuff going on here, because it's leading to a lot of things that are looking pretty bad from certain perspectives at the moment, and I think we're not in a position to address them.
Yeah, no, totally. It's a hellscape, but we live in it, and I feel like we'll get through it at some point, maybe. Who knows?
But yeah, thank you very much for listening to everyone out there who's supported us on Patreon. Is that a form of social media? I don't know.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. 100% no. Patreon's
100%
not social media.
So yeah, thank you so much for your support. We hope you enjoyed this episode. As we said at the top of the show, next month, it's a big one. It's our we're going to do a top 5 non-Nintendo games of 2019. A combined list like we did last year. So you definitely won't want to miss that. But yeah, thanks for listening. We hope you won't be put off social media forever. And hopefully we've had some ideas back.
Follow us on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter at TNL Podcast. And yeah, hopefully there will be things in the future we can be a part of that can reform the mess that everyone has jointly created. But until then, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.